Chapter 8 Revolt of 1857. India is famous for its riches since ancient times. Its spices, cotton, silk textiles, gold, pearls, etc. were also world famous. These articles were highly popular in other countries. India had been carrying on trade with countries like Rome, Greece, and Arab Empire for long. The arrival of European traders. About 500 years ago, some European countries decided to trade with India. The Portuguese were the first among them. Vasco da Gama, a Portuguese sailor, was the first European who discovered the sea route to India via the Cape of Good Hope in 1498. His ship landed at Calicut in Kerala. Soon, the Portuguese had a monopoly over the spice trade from the ruler of Calicut. They amassed great wealth from India and became very rich. They fought against the Arab traders and drove them away, strengthening of British hold. Towards the end of the 16th century, other European countries also decided to exploit Indian shores. The Dutch, British, and French tried to gain a foothold in India. In the end, the British came out victorious and succeeded in throwing out every other European power from India. In 1600, a British trading company by the name of East India Company established its first trading center at Surat. Later, with the permission of the Mughal Emperor Jahangir, they set up their trading centers at Chennai, Kolkata, and Mumbai. They had huge godowns at these places. Later on, they built forts and started keeping their own army with the excuse to protect these godowns. The Battle of Plassey, 1757. Siraj ud Dowlah, the Nawab of Bengal, objected to their building of forts and keeping their own armies. He demanded their removal, but the British refused. The Nawab declared the war against the British. A big battle was fought at Plassey on 23rd June 1757. The Nawab was defeated and the British became very powerful in Bengal. They trained Indian soldiers and employed them in their army. The Indian soldiers in the British army were called sepoys. Expansion of British power. After Bengal, the British started expanding their political power in the rest of the country. At that time, India was divided into many small kingdoms. The rulers of these kingdoms kept fighting with each other. British took advantage of this fact. They started supporting one king against the other and in the bargain gained more power and wealth. They signed treaties with the kings who accepted the British supremacy. Thus, the East India Company, a mere trading company, became a ruling power over large parts of India. Discontent among the Indians. There was discontent among the Indians during British rule. Some of the reasons for the discontent were cotton. After the Industrial Revolution, the British had very big cotton mills, but they could not produce cotton due to the cold climate. Therefore, the British did not have enough cotton and their big cotton mills were showing losses. Cotton grows well in a warm climate and black soil, which India had. The British started taking away the cotton produced by Indian farmers and paid them very low price in return. Indigo. The British were interested only in making money. They also needed indigo, a blue powder used in England for dyeing the cloth produced by their mills. So, they forced the farmers of Bihar to grow indigo. The farmers had no need for indigo as they needed food grains to feed themselves. The farmers were then forced to sell indigo to the British at a very low price. As a result, Indian farmers became very poor. Cottage industry. The Indian cottage industry was also a victim of the British greed. The weavers of cotton and silk in India were forced to sell their cloth only to the British at the prices fixed by them. Anyone found selling his cloth to a trader other than the British was severely punished. All this made the Indian farmers and traders extremely unhappy with the British. The British did not even allow the Indians to start their own mills or factories. Slowly, the Indian handloom industry was forced to close down. The British converted India into a rich source of raw materials for the industries in the Britain. Indian rulers. The British did not spare even the Nawabs and kings of India. The Nawabs and kings were rulers only in name. They had no real power in their hands. The British very cleverly made laws through which they could take over the kingdoms of these kings. One such law was the doctrine of lapse, which said that if a king dies without a child, his kingdom would be taken over by the British. This is what they did to Rani Lakshmibai, the brave queen of Jhansi. They also occupied the states of Satara and Nagpur under this policy. Whenever a state was occupied by the British, the Indian soldiers in that state lost their jobs. Thus, the Indian farmers, weavers, traders, Nawabs, and kings were all unhappy with the British Raj. From time to time, people did express their unhappiness, but the British never cared about them. There were many revolts in various parts of the country from 1816 to 1857, but these were easily suppressed. At last, in 1857, there was a big uprising against the British injustice and cruelty which started from Meerut and spread over a large part of the country. It is known as the Revolt of 1857. The Revolt of 1857. The Revolt of 1857 is called the First War of Independence. It is a very important landmark in our struggle for freedom. This was the first attempt of the Indians to free themselves from the British. Some people also called it Sepoy Mutiny, as the revolt was started by the Indian soldiers in the British Army. There were many reasons that led to this revolt. The Indian soldiers were treated badly. They were not given higher positions in spite of their abilities. This created great discontentment in the hearts of the Indian soldiers. The immediate cause for the revolt was when a new Enfield rifle was introduced. The cartridges for this rifle were supposed to be greased with fat. A rumor spread that the fat used in these cartridges was that of cows and pigs. The covering of these cartridges had to be bitten off before loading the rifle. This hurt the religious feelings of both the Hindus and the Muslims. The Hindus regard cow a holy animal, and the Muslims regard pigs as unclean. The Indian soldiers or sepoys refused to obey their British officers. Instead, 3 Indian regiments shot down their officers, broke open the prisons, and set free their jailed fellow soldiers. The first big spark of revolt started among the Indian soldiers at Meerut on 10th May 1857. Soon, it spread over to other parts of northern and central India. Other sections of the Indian society also joined the revolt. The farmers, traders, and workers took active part in the revolt. At Delhi, they declared Bahadur Shah Zafar, the last Mughal emperor, as their leader. The Hindus and Muslims of India showed great unity during this revolt. Although the revolt began as a mutiny of soldiers, soon it spun into a people's revolt against the British rule in India. Different leaders led the struggle in their own areas. Prominent among them were Nana Sahib Peshwa,
Tantia Tope,
Azimullah Khan, Kunwar Singh, Rani Lakshmibai of Jhansi, and Begum Hazrat Mahal of Awadh. Failure of the revolt. Despite the brave efforts of the Indian people, the revolt turned out to be a failure because the British had better trained soldiers, superior weapons, and above all, an altogether well organized army. On the other hand, Indians were disorganized and were not fully united at that time. The British managed to suppress the revolt very cruelly. Thousands of people were either imprisoned or executed. Hundreds of people were tied to the mouth of guns and blown up. The two sons of Bahadur Shah Zafar were killed. Their heads were cut off and presented to their old father, who had been arrested and kept in a prison in Myanmar, Burma. Result of the revolt. After this, the rule of the East India Company came to an end. The British government felt that India could not be ruled by a private company. So, the control of the country was taken away from the company and India was placed under the direct rule of the British Queen Victoria. The British government appointed a Governor General to rule over India. He was also called the Viceroy. The British Indian Army was reorganized. The number of British soldiers in the army were also increased. No change came with the change of government. Indians were still treated very badly. The Indians started organizing themselves in a better way to fight for their independence. It would be interesting to know that to commemorate the completion of 150 years of the revolt of 1857, the Mutiny March was held in New Delhi from 7 to 11th May 2007. It began from Meerut and ended at Red Fort in Delhi. Let's understand.
a mast,
Gather in great numbers. Foothold, secure position. Bargain, deal or pact between two groups. Treaties, agreements between two states. Uprising, act of resistance or mutiny. Recap. The Portuguese were the first Europeans to trade with India. The East India Company established its first trade center at Surat in 1600. The Battle of
Plassey,
was fought in 1757, in which the Nawab of Bengal was defeated. The revolt of 1857 began from Meerut and then spread to other parts of India.